It wasn't fair. Life wasn't fair. Why was I being punished? What had I done so horribly wrong in my life that made my baby be born this way, that made my marriage fall apart? I just felt hopeless. And it was me and my baby against the world, but I didn't know where I fit.
Just so happy that you chose to be on my show today. And we had the privilege of meeting through Vinnie Tolman's Living God's Light group, which you so beautifully facilitated. And your heart and your humility and just the way that you approach life has really inspired me, probably more than you know. And for those of you listening, Wendy is the author of an international best-selling book titled Big People Don't Pee in the Park, A Mother and Son's Journey with Down Syndrome. And so I think that title alone tells you that you're in for something honest and funny and full of heart. So with that, I welcome you, Wendy, to the show today.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm excited to be here. And I felt the same way about you. There's just something that draws me to you. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to listen to your podcast. I've already shared this with you so many times, but I'm all caught up. So you need to get some more out there.
Okay.
You go on my walks with me, and you and your guests have just changed my world and my life. So I'm just honored to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So we were chatting a little bit before this and, talking about your own journey into spirituality. And you were mentioning that you feel like you're at this point right now in your life where faith has kind of been more of a focus point maybe for you. Whereas in the past, you mentioned you grew up LDS, then you became a young mother to a child with Down syndrome, and maybe how that affected what you thought of God. Do we want to start there and maybe, share a little bit about that part of your life?
Sure, absolutely. And I do need to correct you. I grew up without any religion in my life. And then I met my son's dad. And let me back up a little bit. I did have religion in my family, but my close family, we weren't religious, but all my girlfriends were and all my friends were. So I would go to church and stuff with them because I had to if I wanted to hang out with them. And then I met my son's dad, and he was LDS. So I went through that journey with him, and then we had our son, and he was 3 hours old when we found out he had Down syndrome. And I was just 23. So, and it was, I'll age myself, way back in the 90s, 1990 to be exact. So to be young, and when resources were very limited, and these children were still being put into, some of them still even being put into homes. But, I never saw them. I never saw people with Down syndrome. So when I did see them, it was very few, very rare. So my knowledge, my association was so limited. And what I did know was that they were intellectually impaired, and that they were visually, their looks were visual. So for my young mama's heart, I was devastated. And I honestly thought that I was being punished. And I didn't know I wasn't the best person, and I certainly had and still have my faults, but I didn't know what I had done wrong for God to give me this child. I felt like I was being punished. So I can imagine, being 23, and this is supposed to be this glorious time of new motherhood, and you get something you weren't expecting, this type of outcome. What did you do with that at that time? Like you said, resources were very limited. And then how did you, when you thought that you were being punished for that, what was your knowledge of God at that time? Well, at that time we were going to church religiously.
Hmm.
Pardon the pun.
But did you think he did you think he was a punisher? Is that what you were taught?
I was never taught that, but for somebody to be different or to have this life that was of no value at that time is what I perceived. And I think what a lot of people perceived is, why would anyone be sent a child with Down syndrome if, they're, I mean, it's just at that time, I just thought, okay, well, there's no value in this life, so I must be being punished. I definitely do not think that now. And it did not take me long to figure that out. In fact, what I didn't realize, first of all, was that those emotions I was experiencing, the sadness, the anger, the why me, all of that, I didn't realize that was normal. And I wish I would have known that. I also didn't know that it was okay to grieve. I had to grieve for the child that didn't arrive and then get ready for the child that did arrive. And he was born early, so we were in the NICU. He was in the NICU for a little while, and I stayed in the hospital with him. And in those days, while we were in the hospital, I did nothing but stare into his face and look for those signs of imperfections, so to speak, and everything that was wrong with him. But all I could see was this beautiful baby. He was so cute with his little round face and his little rosy cheeks, and he had a mohawk of blonde hair. And he was just beautiful. And I just thought, this is a baby, and he's my baby. And the love just began to grow, and it grew and grew. And I just thought, nobody's going to tell me that this life doesn't have value, because this is my baby and his life will have value. We're going to get out there and we're going to prove to the world that people with Down syndrome and any other different abilities have value. And we just need to focus on that and not on we need to see the abilities and not the disability.
Of course. And then knowing, how much of an advocate you've become, for those people that are parents with children with disabilities, and to look back now, I'm sure you have perspective on, what he taught you, through this, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But could you walk us through maybe some of the challenges? You're a young mother. This is new for you. Take us back to that time and maybe share with us some of the challenges that you were going through as you were raising Matthew.
So sadly, we had several really good friends who were having babies at the same time. So there was this whole comparison thing, watching their babies meet their milestones and our baby wasn't. So that was really hard for us. And then, I grieved and I cried and I let my emotions show. And my husband didn't really express himself like I was expressing myself. I think he was focused on supporting me and helping me. And I just don't think he was allowing himself. And if he was doing it privately. And so I didn't get to see that. And so it was a strain on our marriage. And it required taking our son to therapies and early intervention and having in-home nurses come to the house to help him with his, moving his muscles, and a lot of negative feedback and comments coming from those visits, telling us what our child would never do, and that, setting limitations on him before he was even walking, telling us that he may never even walk. So I think we just had a lot come down on us, two young parents who knew nothing about this diagnosis and afraid for our future. And we failed our marriage. We failed each other by not expressing ourselves to one another, and for losing the love that brought that baby into this world. So
how long ago, or how long was that after you had Matthew?
So we got divorced right after he turned 3. So
Okay.
he was just 3. And then my life went from hard to harder as I became a single mom to a child with special needs. And he was 3, and I was afraid to date because I knew that I didn't want to have to tell any other guy, yeah, I have a child, but, it always came with that but. And then, being afraid that would scare other men off, So I kind of put my life on a back burner because I was afraid of the possible rejection, because of my son, without somebody even knowing my son.
So many things that the average person probably just doesn't think about, like a little thing like that about, your dating life again. That's not something that we're thinking of with a parent or a single parent that's, raising a child with a disability. But I can only imagine, that's always in the forefront of your mind. And I would imagine, I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, but that you feel like you've lost a little bit of yourself. Was that a feeling that you felt often?
Yeah, I felt like, again, it wasn't fair. Life wasn't fair. Why was I being punished? What had I done so horribly wrong in my life that made my baby be born this way, that made my marriage fall apart, that I just felt hopeless, and it was me and my baby against the world, but a world that I didn't know where I fit. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I had great friends and stuff, but I still felt like I didn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any support at all? Was there any, support, whether it's from friends, family, or, even services out there at that time?
So the services were, they guide you. This is what you're doing from this age to this age. And then they go into school, and then this is what happens in the school. So services were, that was just kind of, I was led that way. As far as like him needing extra, speech therapies, anything like that came out of pocket. Those weren't an option for me really because of my budget. Services for daycares, babysitting, that wasn't an option either. So, it was all things I was trying to figure out as I went. I did have family who was supportive as much as they could be. And my friends, they were very supportive. They have accepted and loved my son from the minute he was born, and he's still changing their lives, and they're still in his life. But the support was just kind of, as far as somebody understanding. Let me just tell you, that's one of the reasons I wrote my book, is because I wanted to make sure that other moms who are feeling what I felt at that time know that there are people out there who know what you are going through, and to look for those groups. And at the time, for me, those groups weren't as available as they are now. So,
So when did things begin to shift for you, where you felt like, am I being punished? And I imagine going through the hardships and being a single mom and then raising a toddler. But when did things begin to shift to where it didn't feel like a punishment anymore?
Because my son brought me so much joy. I kind of, there was a point, I'm going to say a minute in my life, where I was so happy that it was just he and I, because he was my little buddy. And we tackled the world together. So because I didn't have any other distractions in my life, I was able to focus on him, other than being at work full time. I was able to focus on him 100%. And so my goal was to help him achieve everything and anything possible for him to make his life be as, I just wanted him to be as successful as he could be, to achieve his greatest potential. And so because it was just he and I, that focus was there. And then things started to turn around because we were having so much fun. We were laughing. We were just doing a lot of things. I would take him out on bike rides. I would take him to the park all the time. I would go, take him to movies. I would take him anywhere and everywhere that I could, just to get him out there and to have fun with him. I never hid him away. I was never going to hide him away. But because we had so much fun, and because he loved me unconditionally, and because he forgave me on those days when I didn't always need forgiveness, and he still does, I think that's when I went, oh my gosh, I'm not being punished. How did I get so lucky to have this child? Why was I chosen? I went from why me to, oh my gosh, why me? What did I do to get this blessing in my life?
So when was that? How old was Matthew at that, when you started to feel that way? Or recognize that you were feeling that way?
He was very young. He was still, he was very young. I mean, I don't know the exact age, but he was just very young when I just looking into his eyes, and he has these beautiful blue eyes, and they just kind of have like crystals in them. And just the way he would look at me, like he trusted me. He knew that I was always going to protect him. That's kind of how I felt he was looking at me. And so I don't really know a specific age.
But it was younger.
Yeah. But I have to be honest. I mean, I still have hard days, and I still had moments when I was like, okay, I'm being backed into a corner again. For instance, say if there was something at school that I needed some services I felt he should have had, and I was backed into a corner. I would be like, okay, God, why aren't these people seeing these children as your children, and as their education, and as their lives matter? Why? So my thoughts didn't turn from why am I being punished? They turned from that to, why can't everybody else see their value? Why are we fighting? Why aren't we all working together to help create beautiful miracles for these children?
I'm just curious, can you share an example of that? Like you said, you're at the school. What was happening in particular at the school that made you feel back in the corner? Because I just think bringing awareness to this is important.
Yeah. So, a lot of moms, and this just came to me probably since writing my book. But when you're registering your children for school, I think of me when I was getting ready to go to school. You're getting your school clothes, you're getting your school schedule, you're getting your locker, and you're getting, and then the bus comes, and you get on the bus and you go. And then for those hours, you're in school and teachers teaching you. Well, something as silly as having me pay registration fees and then tell me that my son doesn't get a locker. Well, why am I paying for those fees if we don't get it? That doesn't make sense. And then, my son, something that was always important to me was his speech. I knew he was going to struggle with his speech. And so I wanted extra therapy for him, speech therapy. And I wasn't as worried about math, because there'd always be calculators. I did want him to be able to read, but speech was so important to me because I knew in his future he was going to have to communicate with people. Well, when I'd asked for more, I was told, we can't give him more speech therapy. He gets 15 minutes a week. Well, how is 15 minutes of speech therapy a week enough for any child who has challenges with their speech? And so when I would go and try to advocate for more, the response I would receive would be, well, if we give your son more speech therapy, that's going to take away from another child. And do you feel okay with that? And no, I don't feel okay about that, but that's that child's parents' responsibility to be in here advocating for them. I'm here worried about my child. So, and those are just a couple of examples, but there were several situations like that.
And I imagine looking back now, do you feel like you went through all of these things to just really see where the needs are and to help be an advocate for that so that these services are more available for people, or that these other parents have the support of people like you to know how to navigate through things?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to speak to like some early intervention specialists with my book, and to some therapists and caseworkers. And I've been able to give them a different perspective, and they've appreciated that because they're doing the things now that I was faced with. And so my focus has been, let's work to be allies. We don't want to be fighting against each other, because the ultimate goal here is to help this child. So how can we work together to make that happen with the resources that we have? And so a hope with my book is to reach those specialists, those doctors, anybody who works with these families, to understand our perspective and what our ultimate goal is, and then to help the parents do so in a loving and calm way, not to come, because what I did wrong in some of those instances came from mama bear mode. Like, instead of coming across, questions like, okay, so what can we do instead? Instead of coming from that mama bear mode, come from the place of love and just how can we work together? Yes. So that's what I'm trying to do as well. And also show these parents, be their advocate, be their voice. You have to, because nobody else is. So it's just all about how you do it, though,
I think that's such an important message for anybody going through anything, that it's all about the spirit behind it, and that you'll make more progress if we're working together, obviously, than attacking and having that energy behind it. I've seen some of your posts, and as you were saying earlier, I had to throw this out there, how much fun you have with Matthew, and you still are having so much fun. I mean, your posts just bring a smile to my face. So if anybody is listening, you have to follow Wendy, because it's just, you can't help but see some of the things that you post of the two of you doing together, and it just warms your heart and puts a smile on your face. So I think I would know the answer to this, but what would you say, raising Matt has taught you about God's character that you might not have seen otherwise?
Well, we're all a work in progress. Every single human being is a work in progress. And I believe wholeheartedly that any child who has different abilities or any kind of special needs is placed on this earth to help teach us. I believe it could be God's way of keeping us grounded, of giving us that perspective of the awareness. Are we being our best selves? Because these individuals have no agenda. They are truly sweet spirits. I say that, and my son can be a royal pain sometimes, but he has no agenda. His soul is 100% pure, and he wouldn't hurt anybody. And I believe these individuals are here to help us. And so when I hear of, I believe in, I don't think I want to say that. When I hear that there are women or families who don't feel up to the task of completing that pregnancy, it breaks my heart, because I know the blessings and the joy and the love that will fill that home, and even those parents who are where I was 23 years or 34 years ago when I was 23. I know my focus right now is to be a glimpse into the future. That I'm over 3 decades into this, and I know the joy and the love, the heartache, the laughs, the pain, the rewards. I know what they are all going to experience. And so I just believe that that's why they are here, to bring the rest of us that peace, that joy, on those days that we need it and we're not our best.
What has Matthew taught you about life, and what do you think that you've learned from him that you wouldn't have learned otherwise?
Matthew makes me aware of my abilities every day. He makes me appreciate my abilities every day. I am a kinder person because of my son. I feel I am more compassionate because of my son. I am aware. I see when somebody needs somebody else. And I just do my best to live each day like Matthew does. Like I said, I'm a work in progress. I definitely have my faults, and I'm praying for forgiveness every day. But I'm aware. And I just try to be a better person. I try to live like my son.
I love when you said they have, no agenda, and it's just the happiness, the joy, and how you said it was so pure. And it's just, if everybody could be so lucky to have somebody like that in our lives, it is quite the blessing. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book. First and foremost, what made you choose the title, Big People Don't Pee in the Park?
Well, here's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Big people don't pee in the park. Well, because the resources that were available to me when I had him were very minimal, and they were scary, what was available. And because I know the life that these new parents are in for and the humor that fills my days, it was important to me to write a book that focused more on humor than anything. And so each of the chapters is a story my son has, we've been faced with, and how we worked through them. So the first few chapters are my story of how my journey began. So they are that authentic, hard place. But after that, I focus mostly on humor. The title came from, there is a chapter called Big People Don't Pee in the Park. So it happens, obviously, at a park with my son, who may or may not have been peeing in the park. So I remember this thing happened. I caught him peeing, and because the bathrooms were locked, he was around 9 or 10. The bathrooms were locked. It was fall. I went to work the next day. I was telling my boss the story and what I had said when I caught him in the act. And my boss said, that's the title of your book, because she knew I was going to write a book. Although that book is what I'm working on now. So it's a totally different book. But when she said that, I was like, okay, I actually really like that. And then as I was putting together this book, it just felt so appropriate to put that title with this book versus the book I'm working on now.
So that one is more about your experiences and the humor that you weave into what life's been like for you.
Yes.
And then what's the book that you're working on now?
It's a book I'm actually working on with Matt. So it's fiction, and he's helping me create the world and the characters. So I don't want to give away too much. I know there are other people out there who are doing something similar, but the reason I wanted to write this book is because my son does love to read. Matthew, he loves to read, he loves to write, and he's got great penmanship and great spelling for the most part. But he likes to read books. He loves stories like Harry Potter and the Divergent series and stuff like that. But those books can be hard for him. So this idea came to me when he was in junior high-ish, to write a book for anyone who struggles with reading on a topic that they still, that still gets their attention. So it's not like a see Jane and Dick run kind of book. It's just, down to a lower level for reading, but still entertaining. So I'm hoping to get young adults who like to read and people with special needs who like to read, but may have a challenging time with other books.
That's so special. I don't know much about this, but are there resources like books out there like that help to help those with disabilities, but yet have a storyline that keeps their interest? Is there much of that out there, or is that something that's lacking?
So there are actually a lot of young adult authors who write some great books on fantasy that Matt loves, and so I think they're hitting him, and so there's that audience that they're reaching. My storyline is just a little different than those books. So,
right.
And it's fun to have Matt on this project with me.
I can only imagine. I think that's so special. And like I said before, I watch your posts and it does still seem like the two of you are taking on the world. I know you are remarried now as well. So I guess the dating thing did find its way back into your life at some point.
Yeah, I met this amazing man who he just loved Matt, and he treated Matt like he would his own sons. And I think he was a little intimidated at first, but when he realized Matt just loves to play video games. He loves to play basketball. He loves to do what every other teenager is doing. And so I felt safe bringing him into Matt's life and our life. And then when he asked me to marry him, he, knew this was a lifelong commitment and that it involved bringing Matt. And so we'll never be empty nesters. Matt loves it here too much. So we're just growing old, the three of us together. And Matt does still go to his dad's house. So he sees his dad and his sister with his dad's second wife. He has a good relationship with them. So that's really important that they have that relationship too. So
let's pivot a little bit. You and I met because we both were inspired by Vinnie Tolman's story, and he was a guest on this podcast before, but I had heard his story in other places as well. What inspired you about Vinnie and his story?
I was actually at a writing retreat when I met Vinnie, and his book wasn't published yet, and he came up to me and he said something to me that was so odd for a stranger just to come up to another stranger and say this. What he didn't know, actually he knew, my parents had both passed away within 4 months of each other in 2019. And that's really when I started questioning, what is our purpose? Why are we here? What's this life all about? We're born and then we die, and we've got bins of crap we've collected through our lifetime, and it's just going to the dump or the Goodwill or to recycle, So what's the purpose? Why are we here? And I heard a voice say, help them. And it was so clear that I turned around because I thought my husband was standing behind me and he wasn't there. And so I knew I heard help them. Well, I had been watching social media earlier in the day and seen some posts from some new moms who were coming online and saying that they were struggling with the diagnosis they had just received. They had also just had babies with Down syndrome, and it clicked. Help them. Okay, so I'm supposed to write a book. Well, I had been compiling these stories of life with Matt, and it just kind of snowballed this train of thought. So I went, is that the book I'm supposed to be writing right now? So went to this writer's retreat. Vinnie was there. Vinnie walked up to me and just said, your dad loves your mom. Well, my parents had divorced when I was 13. But I knew my dad loved my mom. And when he said that, it kind of caught me off guard. And then,
you don't know this person. Yeah.
And I can still picture where we were standing when he said it to me. And then I stood there for a minute and I said, well, my parents are both passed away. And he goes, I know. your mom's standing next to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so wait a minute. So I still don't know who this man is. We're both at this writer's retreat. So we go through our classes, and then that night we stand up and we do our shares, and he gets up and he talks about this book that's just about to be published, and he shares his story about his near-death experience. And my mouth just dropped. And that's, I actually have to give Vinny credit for giving me this spiritual awakening. Because then that night I had a strange dream, and I hadn't dreamed about my mom since she passed away. And in that dream, I just walked off a ledge of a cliff, and I was just falling and falling and falling. And I could see the ocean below me. But as I fell closer to the ocean was dropping as well. So it was like I was never going to hit. So I felt peace and I felt calm. Like, I'm not afraid. I'm falling, but I'm not afraid. And right then, I felt my mom lay on my pillow, and I felt her cheek on my cheek. And so the next day I was telling Vinny about it, and he shared with me that my mom was with me, and because he'd already told me that the day before, 2 days before. But he said, she's telling you to take the leap and that she's got you. And that just kind of opened up this whole realm for me. I went from wondering where my parents were and wondering what this life was all about to suddenly having these experiences and feeling like my parents were with me on this journey writing my book, that they were guiding me. And whenever I couldn't come up with answers, or whenever I felt stuck, I felt energy from something. And I started calling it the universe, because after my divorce and I met my husband, who was a spiritual person, but not a religious person, I began to wonder this whole God thing again. So I'm like all over the place.
Oh, no, you're.
But I felt like I started getting these answers about God and the universe, and, that there is more than just this life, that our loved ones are with us. And, just have that faith and that trust and that love, that unconditional love. I felt more love from my parents with them being on the other side than I did while they were here. And that seems so strange to say, but we had some rocky times in our relationship. And I just feel like I'm in a different space. They're obviously in a different place. And our relationship has just grown. And as a result, it's just blossomed. My love and the energy of this God source. And Vinny, being in the Living God's Light program, being around his energy really amplified what I was starting to feel.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, his story is just one of the most detailed and fascinating near-death experience stories that I've ever heard. And I've always had a little fascination with them, and his was just, you can't help but not know after hearing his story that there's just so much beyond what we think we know. And there's the way he teaches is different, and it doesn't come at all from a religious place at all. In fact, it's very inclusive, and that's, one of the problems that I find with religion is just that it is, and I think more people are waking up to this, is that it is it can be so divisive, and it's not meant to be like that. And I've shared, with you my little tree analogy, and how, we're all just coming from that same source and branched here, and you're here, and all those branches are these different perspectives or different places or different circles of people. But when it all boils down, we're from that same place, and Vinny has so much more to teach beyond that, but is just really big on uniting and being authentic and walking in who you are. And so, yeah, I was curious how that has opened you up, but it's clear to see how that did. And how long was it after your parents? So I'm going back to that moment that you heard help them. So your parents both of your parents pass away. You're having this moment of, what's the point? And you hear help them. And then you start looking at the social media and okay, my job is to help these other parents going through challenges. And then how long was it from that point till you went to the writing retreat?
So they passed in 2019, and then we had 2020. And then in 2021 during COVID is when I started to feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be in this life. Mm-hmm. And so I planned my retirement and from this company that I had worked for 36 years. And I thought, okay, I'm going to retire and write this book. So that's 2021. And I think it was 2022 it was 2022, May of 2022 or June, when I met Vinny. And then his book came out shortly after. I knew after hearing his story that night at the retreat, I knew I needed his book. And so it was about 2 years after losing both of my parents that I met Vinny, and then his book came out. I read his book. By the time I finished reading his book, I was sobbing. And I was sobbing because for the first time, I felt like, you know what? God loves me just for who I am. It's okay that I'm not going to a building to worship him. He loves me exactly as I am. And I'm okay because I carried this guilt for so long that I had one of his special children, one of his angels that, I had been given birth to, and I wasn't taking him to church. And so for a long time, I felt a lot of guilt that I wasn't taking this child to church. And so I had this internal battle going on. It's okay, Wendy, it's okay. So when I read his book, I knew that I had been a good mom. I've been a good mom. I've dedicated my life to this child. And just because I wasn't taking him to a building every Sunday to worship, didn't mean that I wasn't fulfilling my duty. And hearing his story and reading his book and reading about those 10 principles just made me realize I'm okay. I'm okay. So that was really the beginning of my real spiritual awakening, where I began to pursue it, not just wait for these signs and these things. I began to pursue. I began to question. I began to pray. I didn't know who I was praying to. Am I praying to God? Am I praying to the universe? Is it a heavenly Father? Is it the Holy Spirit? I didn't quite know who. So I just began praying to all of it. And I have had prayers answered. I have, my faith is just, in fact, my faith is so strong that I find myself now questioning, okay, when another challenge comes at me, because life tends to throw us challenges. I've had many. When the next one comes, I really hope my faith stays this strong. I really hope that I don't become that victim, have that victim mentality. I look at death differently. I see death differently based on what Vinny has said. I don't fear it. He shares that he celebrates. So I find myself responding to people who lose loved ones differently.
I liked what you said about your parents and kind of that you feel closer to them now, because like you said, that could sound strange, but it didn't sound strange to me. Because I think they're, like you said, you're in a different place, they're in a different place, and not just physically speaking either, but it's just a love, a connection that's maybe more pure than before. What would you say? Like, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe facing or in the middle of a situation that they didn't plan for and wondering, where is God in the middle of this? Am I being punished? What would you say to somebody that's having that moment?
It's easy for me to sit back and say, God's not allowing these things to happen. Let him carry you through the pain. Allow him to be in your life and to carry you through the pain. It's easy for me to say that, when there are horrible, horrible tragedies going on every day. And when you think about some things that people are faced with, and for somebody like me to just say that to them, that might be hard to hear. It's not what you want to hear. What I know and what I believe strongly is that he is with us. And if we allow him, if we open ourselves up and allow him, he will hold us. He will help us through the most difficult times we would ever be faced with. And what I've learned in my life is that all of these difficult situations I've been faced with have turned into being the greatest blessings I've ever had. So what started out as a sad, unfortunate situation with my journey into motherhood has become the most beautiful journey with motherhood. I say that, and I'm not the best mom. Let me just say that. But my divorce, that was one of the hardest and most difficult things I've ever gone through, being a child, raising a child with special needs alone. But if I would have stayed with him, I would have been unhappy for the rest of my life, or who knows how long, and not met this man that I'm supposed to be with. And same for him as well. He wasn't meant to be with me either. And side note here, I just participated in another book. I wrote a story in an anthology called Threads of Gold. And this book is about grief. There's 26 authors who wrote a story about grief in this book. And I read some stories that made me sob. And yet from those stories, support groups were formed. Nonprofit organizations were formed. Just great blessings came from these horrific events that people have been faced with. So I don't want to say that there's a blessing in disguise in all these bad things that happen. But when you get in that space, a healthy space, a space where you can see it, there is something good, that comes from these times. And God is good and God is love.
I love that. What you're speaking is exactly the mission that's on my heart. And, you know my story, and I feel like I've shared it enough times, but, I walked through this, 2-year journey of cancer with my sister, and I was convinced that she was going to be a miracle. Convinced. Even when she passed away in front of me, I was still calling her back because I'd heard stories like Vinny's or, other people's, because I'd always, like I said, had a little bit of a fascination with it. And I was just like, it can't be, because I believed so much and I felt like my faith was unshakable. But yet, the outcome didn't come the way that I had expected it to. And the next morning, I remember just being really confused and, really sad, obviously, but I had this peace. And I know that peace came to me from the 2 years before that I had just really been plugged into. And Vinny talks about this too. Like, I had been plugged into nothing but miracle stories. I turned off all the stuff that, the news. I just couldn't watch that stuff anymore. And it wasn't because it was a religious lawful thing to do. It was within my heart that I did not want to take in like this negative stuff. And it changed me. And I thought I was researching all this stuff to give my sister hope, and I know it did, but it wound up doing a work in me. And it propelled me to go into doing this podcast and really seeing that the peace of God carried me through one of the hardest times in my life. And you kind of touched on this earlier as well about, I'm a little nervous about, I don't want any more of these trials, but yet I know where to go when I have them. And there's that poem, the Footprints poem. I have it over here in my office, but I love that poem. It's older, but it just talks about, there's somebody's walking on the beach and there's two sets of footprints. And then at one point during the hardest part of their life, there was only one set of footprints. And they asked the Lord, why did you leave me? Because they only saw the one set. And the answer was, that was the time that I carried you. And that's what happened to me. And now my desire on my heart is to help people know that when a door closes or they experience something that they think is, the end of the world for them, that it's not. It is often an invitation to something greater if you allow it to. And if you can find that little flicker of hope within yourself to trust that, okay, this was not the outcome that I wanted, but I'm going to trust you that something good will come out of it. And just to start to lean into that it happens. And I think the way that you said that too, like that it's not a blessing in disguise, which is, cliche. And sometimes people don't want to hear it that way. But if we lean into that and allow for that to be a possibility, it's kind of amazing what that invites us into in our own lives, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the chapter in my that I wrote in this book was about when I lost my dad, because he raised me. My parents got divorced, and then my dad raised us. And when I lost him, it was unexpected. And why would God take my dad 4 months after taking my mom? And why was I feeling this way when I was old enough my parents lived a long life. So why was I feeling this way? So I recently had the opportunity if my dad hadn't passed away, I don't know that I would have pursued this dream that I've had my entire life to write my first book, the Big People Don't Pee in the Park. But from that, and from that journey, gave me the opportunity to thank my dad for everything he had done for me and for being on this journey with me from the other side, but to acknowledge his legacy in this second book I participated in. So I was at one point wondering what the purpose is, what's our legacy, why are we here? And then now I'm on this journey of helping preserve our legacies. So sharing my dad's legacy, in this book, and honoring him, and sharing my son's legacy and honoring him, so this just kind of all coming full circle, and the answers are there when you're supposed to receive them.
It's so beautiful. And I know you shared a little story that happened today just before we spoke, where you have a ring with your dad's handwriting engraved on it, and it was behind your dresser. And then lo and behold, it somehow made its way to your bathroom today before we spoke. So I think it's also a little, if I venture to say, him showing you that he's with you.
I know. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going cuckoo? I'm doing all kinds of crazy things now. I'm talking to birds. I'm talking to squirrels. I'm talking to trees. Things are showing up in places they're not supposed to. So,
well, you don't sound crazy to me, because you know me. I go on my walks and I feel like everything speaks. I mean, obviously not audibly, but there's messages in it all, and this is our playground, Earth, and I think it all does speak. So, tell me one last thing. If you could go back and speak to yourself on the day that you got the diagnosis, what would you say? And what would your prayer be at that time?
I would just hug her tight. I would hug her tight. I would tell her, I would whisper in her ear that not only are you going to be okay, you're going to be more than okay. Not only is your son going to be okay, but your son is going to make thousands of people laugh every single day. Your son is going to make a difference. Your baby's going to be more than okay. And buckle up because you're in for a ride.
I love it. See, I just love how just heartfelt you are, and genuine and funny and open and raw and real. You present that, and I'm again very just grateful to know you and have you in my life. Where can people go to learn more about you, get a copy of your book, and then also to be on the lookout for your new book to come?
The best place is probably just wendylhooton.com, my website. So Wendy L. Hooton, HOOTON.com. You can connect with me on social media there. There's all kinds of information about my son and I, our story, how we began. There's some Down syndrome resources out there, and we just recently opened a shop with our books and some shirts and some stickers, and just trying to show the world the value that these incredible humans bring each and every day.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. And I will make sure to put a link in the description, so if anyone's listening, they can go back and refer to that. It was a joy to see you again and to have a conversation with you. And I just thank you for being willing to come and share your story and a bit of your life and what you've experienced with my audience today.
Thank you, Olivia. Thanks for having me. I am so glad. I feel the same way. I feel like God put you in my life. Like I said, I love listening to you when I'm on my walks, and you're doing a beautiful thing, and your sister is with you as you change lives with every episode you put out there.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and follow.